Parishioners at St. Bernard Parish in Breaux Bridge were stunned to hear their pastor was charged with child pornography. Father F. David Broussard faces 500 counts of child pornography. He's been the pastor of St. Bernard Parish for 2 years. State police say the Special Victims Unit received a complaint that the computer Father Broussard had primary access to contained child pornography.
My only understanding from the police that I visited with was that the computer was brought into the repair shop. And the technician there, as I think it's state law, they have a duty to report anything that is illegal.
Bishop Douglas Desatel says the Diocese of Lafayette has never received a complaint against Father Broussard until now.
Only good letters, you know, except the people who loved him in the parish. But, you know, this kind of illness hides itself, you know, in a person. We don't know.
Bishop J. Douglas Desatel says the child pornography was allegedly found on Father David Broussard's personal computer. He says the computer was allegedly brought in for repair, and he believes it was the technician who was the one that alerted the authorities. Broussard has been with the St. Bernard Church for the last 2 years, but has been ordained for 23. Bishop Desatel says the diocese has never received any complaints about Broussard in the past, including complaints from students at the school.
As we know in our society, child pornography is a plague, and it runs the gamut of all strata of society. And it's something that has to be addressed right at the beginning as soon as it's known, which is why I was happy to cooperate with the state officials in doing that, for the protection of young and innocent people.
The diocese has never received any complaints about Broussard in the past, including complaints from students at the school.
Bishop Douglas Desatel says the Diocese of Lafayette has never received a complaint against Father Broussard.
Bishop Desatel says they do not plan to investigate any of the other priests at St. Bernard Catholic Church because they haven't received any complaints.
Bishop Desatel says they do not plan to investigate any of the other priests at St. Bernard Catholic Church because they haven't received any complaints.
For the protection of young and innocent people.
For the protection of young and innocent people.
Those who attend St. Bernard are shocked that something like this happened in their congregation, but say they still have faith in the good work of their church.
I feel bad for the church and the community.
I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
I feel bad for the church and the community.
I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
I feel bad for the church and the community. I just don't want this church to be a symbol of the acts of one person, you know. I don't want our beautiful church that we all love to be a representation in any way of one person's horrible and I would call it evil acts.
The bishop came over the house. He said nothing like this had ever happened before, and they asked us not to press charges.
And what did your mother do?
My mother? She put out freaking cookies.
There was a lot of pressure to keep quiet.
From the church?
Yeah, from the church. But not just the church. From my friends. From the other parishioners.
Well, many of the priests that I treated were psychosexually stunted on the emotional level of a 12 or 13-year-old.
Jeez. Sure, the chief knew. Everybody knew, but nobody wants to cuff a priest.
And what about the prosecutor?
I shouldn't talk about this shit.
I think you should, actually.
Since the 1950s, there have been roughly 17,000 reported victims of church sex abuse in the U.S. alone, and these are just the ones that have been reported. An estimated 1.5 to 5% of the clergy is thought to have been involved in cases from countries all around the world. In the U.S., since 1950, almost 7,000 priests were accused of abuse. And it's reported that the Catholic Church has spent over $2.5 billion nationally on lawsuits. In Ireland, during the 2000s, the government launched official investigations into the charges. Subsequent reports estimated that possibly tens of thousands of Irish children were abused sexually and otherwise from the 1930s to the 1990s. In the Netherlands, a recent report alleged that over a span of 40 years, about 1 in 5 vulnerable children was molested by Catholic clergy. However, some point to politics as the reason for our seeming media obsession with the church. Cynics point out that several studies suggest Catholic priests are no more likely to sexually abuse children than other religious authorities. And some point to reports of similar cover-ups by the Boy Scouts of America for child sex abuse. But perhaps unlike these others, the Catholic Church has been infamously known for turning a blind eye. Some offending priests were simply relocated to another diocese where abuse could often continue.
Meet the Catholic Church, owners of a global child sex abuse scandal. In the past 50 years, around 30,000 people in 25 countries have reported abuse by Catholic priests. Church officials stand accused of failing to report cases to secular authorities. In a recent letter of apology to Irish Catholics, Pope Benedict XVI said fast-paced change and secularization has led to moral decline, blaming modern society. But the Church's own paper trail shows it has known about and failed to deal with the problem for 2,000 years. The first recorded link between priests and pedophilia can be found in a manual for church officials from around AD 60 called Didache. Older than the New Testament, it made the rule clear: thou shalt not seduce young boys. In 309, the Church's Council of Elvira, which dealt with issues of clerical marriage and celibacy, said, those who sexually abuse boys may not commune, even when death approaches. In the 8th century, the Penitential of St. Bede, a renowned scholar and monk, argued that clerics sodomizing children should be punished. In 1051, St. Peter Damian wrote the Book of Gomorrah, which complained of rampant child abuse and attempts to hide it by church superiors. The book was addressed to Pope Leo IX, who reacted by punishing only the worst of serial sex abusers and arguing that abuse was a spiritual issue, not a criminal one. In 1140, a canon lawyer known as Gratian of Bologna called for pedophile priests to be put before secular courts. In 1568, Pope Pius V acknowledged the problem in the papal order, the Herendum, calling for pedophile priests to be charged. In 1741, Pope Benedict XIV wrote the definitive church document on child sex abuse, the Sacramentum Penitentiae. He recommended the problem be dealt with internally. Historians of the Church say that by the 17th century, a system of promoting and moving priests to avoid scandal had developed. In recent times, church laws passed in 1917 and 1962 called for cases to be handled in secret, with no requirement to report offenders. In 2001, head of the Holy Office and future Pope, Cardinal Ratzinger, argued abuse allegations should be dealt with under the Church's greatest level of secrecy, that of pontifical secret. This week, the Vatican pointed to guidelines created in 2003, but unfortunately not circulated, requiring offending priests to be reported to police. A small step forward, or further evidence of bureaucratic failure. The Catholic Church, owners of a so-called modern problem that goes back 2,000 years. Big on sin, big on guilt, not so big on confession.
Before we open this last and worst door, we must know that the parishioners are just as guilty in the situational and systemic factors that create in an otherwise healthy person the dispositions to create such evil. It is clear social psychology. And if we understand the neurology of this as well, these situations create a acquired sociopathy. Okay? In plain terms, it's not about bad apples. It's about bad barrels and bad barrel makers. And the priests and the hierarching organization, just as much as the parishioners, are all guilty in creating this situation and adding to this system that abuses in the worst way what Jesus Christ called the greatest among us in the kingdom of heaven.
Hi there. I'm looking for Ronald Paquin.
Yes?
Your father, Paquin?
Yes, that's right.
I'm Sasha Pfeiffer from the Boston Globe.
Okay.
Could I ask you a few questions?
Go ahead, dear.
We spoke to several men who knew you when they were boys at St. John the Baptist in Haverhill. They told us you molested them. Is that true?
Sure, I fooled around, but I never felt gratified myself.
Right. But you admit to molesting boys at St. John the Baptist?
Yes, but as I said, I never got any pleasure from it. That's important to understand.
Right. But can you tell me where and how you fooled around with these boys?
I want to be clear. I never raped anyone. There's a difference. I should know.
How would you know?
I was raped.
I'm sorry. Who raped you?
Bonnie, who are you talking to?
Father
It's
Paquin.
okay,
Father
Jane.
Paquin, who raped you?
Who are you?
Sasha Pfeiffer from the Globe.
Please get off
for
my
myself.
porch. Get inside the house, Ron.
Mr.
Get inside, Ron.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Who are you?
I'm his sister, and I don't want you coming back here.
Miss Paquin.
You better do better than you did before. Motherfucker knocking down the door. Love God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And equally, give love to others as you give it to yourself. The letter kills. Woe to you, the keepers of the law. For you did not gain access to the keys of knowledge. For you did not enter into yourselves. Not only that, but you hindered others from entering into themselves.
Get up here.
The disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" He called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven." Once, on being asked by the Pharisees when the kingdom of God would come, Jesus replied, "The coming of the kingdom is not something that can be observed, nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of God is within you, in your midst. Since the beginning of creation, the invisible power and divine nature of the ever-present Godhead has clearly been seen and understood in the things that do appear. For those with eyes see."